It was just another quiet Sunday morning on one of those national political talk shows where nothing big usually happens. The kind of program where politicians talk around each other and everything feels rehearsed. The lights in the studio were warm, the cameras were already rolling, and the host was easing into the show with a calm voice. Everyone seemed comfortable. J.D. Vance, sitting in his usual suit, dark blue with a slightly crooked tie, looked relaxed, even a little smug. He leaned back in his chair like someone who had done this 100 times and never once lost control of the conversation. Across from him sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. She wasn't talking much. Dressed in a rust-colored blazer that somehow drew attention without asking for it. She sat straight, still and quiet. She didn't jump in or interrupt. She just watched. Her leather tote bag sat by her side, and inside was something nobody was ready for. Not the anchor, not the panel, and especially not J.D. Vance. The host kicked things off with a question about campaign finance reform. Nothing new, just the usual dance around political money and influence. J.D. Vance answered quickly, smoothly, like someone who had said these lines before. He called it noise, said it was something blown out of proportion by what he called angry bloggers. The anchor laughed politely. Vance smirked. It was all going according to plan. But Jasmine didn't laugh. She didn't smile. She didn't even blink. She just waited. And then, while the room carried on like it always did, she reached slowly into her bag and pulled out a slim folder. The moment was quiet, but not ordinary. She didn't wave it around. She didn't make a speech. She simply placed it on the table in front of her and flipped it open. The studio felt a little colder after that. The other panelists noticed. Even the anchor leaned forward slightly. The folder held papers, real ones, printed, highlighted, with notes written in the margins. Jasmine looked straight ahead and spoke clearly, not louder, just with purpose. "Before we go any further," she said, her voice steady, "I think it's important viewers see what we're actually talking about." She held up the first page. It was a campaign finance document, an FEC filing dated earlier that year. The donation listed was large, $50,000. The donor? A company tied to a defense contractor under federal investigation. J.D. Vance blinked. Then he shifted in his seat. The anchor's eyes flicked toward the control room. Everyone could feel something change. No one said a word, but all attention moved to Jasmine. She looked at Vance and said quietly, "This isn't a theory, it's documentation." And just like that, the whole show took a turn no one expected. The moment Jasmine Crockett lifted the first document, the studio changed. Not loudly, but completely. The friendly air was gone. It was as if the lights got colder, like the room understood what was coming before anyone said a word. She didn't raise her voice, didn't try to perform. She just started flipping through, page after page, placing them on the table like pieces in a puzzle. First, a donation record from February, then another from March, then a third, each one linked to a company with business in front of the Senate, and each one just under the threshold that would require public reporting in detail. It didn't take long for patterns to show. The same donor name, again and again, tied to companies under investigation, defense contractors, energy firms, lobbyists. Every time Vance supported a bill or introduced a new amendment, the money flowed in. Jasmine didn't just say it. She showed it. Emails printed with timestamps, donor addresses, notes in the margins. Her finger moved across the pages as she spoke, steady and calm. The anchor stopped trying to move the conversation forward. His smile faded. He looked between Vance and Crockett, unsure how to steer this kind of storm. Vance pushed back, but not strongly. He waved a hand and called it hearsay, trying to laugh it off. "You're quoting gossip," he said. Jasmine didn't react. Instead, she calmly turned to the next page. "This is your staffer's email," she said, pointing. "Same signature, verified metadata. I had it checked last week." The fact-check team in the back room jumped into action. Screens lit up. Producers leaned closer to their monitors. In under a minute, the anchor received the confirmation through his earpiece. The email was real. What had started as a debate was turning into something else entirely, something live and very public. And outside the studio, things were moving fast. On social media, people clipped the moment Jasmine first opened her folder and posted it everywhere. Twitter, now X, exploded with hashtags like Checker Vance exposed and Checker she brought receipts. A freeze frame of Vance's face mid-reaction, eyes wide and mouth half open, began to spread. One user posted, "That face when the homework is due, and she brought it all." Even Reddit threads started forming mid-show, with users digging into FEC records in real time, confirming what she said, one line at a time. While the public connected the dots, Jasmine continued. Her voice never changed, but her message cut deep. The next document was a memo from a natural gas company based in Oklahoma. It mentioned a scheduled call with Vance's office and ended with a line that didn't need interpretation. "We anticipate permit movement following this communication." Right after that memo, 3 separate donations. Not huge, just smart. Each one small enough to stay under reporting limits, but when you saw them next to each other, lined up against the calendar, it was like a trail of crumbs leading straight back to Vance's desk. At that point, Vance stopped pretending to be relaxed. His foot tapped the floor. He sat up straighter. He spoke faster, said words like smear and political theater. But Jasmine wasn't playing. "This isn't theater," she said. "It's documentation." Behind the scenes, what no one watching knew was that this wasn't just Jasmine working on her own. A quiet man named Patrick Healy had been the first to break the silence. He had worked with a major lobbying firm that handled Vance's donor relationships. Patrick had never been a public figure. He didn't speak much in meetings, didn't show up in group photos. He just made things happen. Scheduled calls, sent talking points, organized meetings that never made headlines. But something broke. In him, the day his sister called. She was a nurse at a rural hospital in Alabama, and it had just closed down. No warning, just gone. The funding had been cut quietly, part of a policy shift in a committee Vance had helped push through. Patrick had sent emails, shaped policy briefs, and now the job he helped design had put someone he loved out of work. He didn't get mad. He got quiet. And then, one by one, he started collecting files. He didn't go to the media. He sent the documents to Rami, a staffer in Crockett's office. Rami didn't rush either. He took 2 weeks just to confirm the basics. Then Jasmine got involved. She didn't run to the press. She called lawyers, checked facts, cross-referenced everything. This wasn't about being the loudest. It was about being right. Back in the studio, Crockett placed one final document on the table. It was an email, not to a staffer, but to Vance himself. It thanked him directly for his discretion and resolve. The anchor read it aloud. The live feed picked up every word. The fact-checkers confirmed it. Again. And the memo from the energy company? It had been sent through a secure domain tied to their internal server. Vance didn't know where to look. The calm confidence he'd walked in with had faded. He wasn't just being challenged, he was being cornered. He called it a setup. Said she was trying to go viral. But Crockett only nodded. "If it's false," she said, "take me to court." And that was the thing. She wasn't asking for applause. She wasn't trying to destroy him with noise. She had already done it with facts. Vance tried to respond again, but his words were clipped, careful. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his water. The anchor didn't try to change the subject. No one did. Because in that moment, the story had already changed, and no one was going to be able to stop it from spreading. The question from the anchor wasn't even dramatic. It was plain, almost soft. "Senator, do you deny your office received these emails?" But the pause that followed, that's when everything cracked. J.D. Vance didn't answer right away. He looked at the anchor, then at Crockett, then at the folder sitting on the table, now heavy with documents that didn't blink or back down. It was a 2-second silence, but it said more than anything he'd said that morning. Then finally, he spoke. "We've done nothing illegal," he said, his voice tighter than before. Crockett didn't flinch. "Then sue me." The anchor blinked. "You're willing to testify under oath?" "Absolutely," she replied without a moment of hesitation. That was the moment it stopped being a debate. It became something real. Not opinion, not performance, just a calm, direct challenge. And she wasn't backing down. Then she reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out something small. A flash drive. She slid it across the table, not to Vance, but to the anchor. "This contains full email logs," she said. "Internal memos, donor records, a full timeline." The anchor hesitated, then picked it up slowly like it might burn his fingers. The room went still again. A few seconds later, a producer's voice came through the earpiece. The flash drive had been scanned. No viruses, no tricks, just files. Hundreds of them. Then came the voice memo. The anchor read it aloud. A voicemail from a known energy lobbyist thanking one of Vance's aides for their quiet cooperation during the amendment process. The memo was short but direct. "Please extend our thanks to the senator for walking us through the finer points of the revised language." Vance sat frozen. His eyes darted back and forth. Then, suddenly, he leaned forward and tried to interrupt. "You're reading gossip now," he snapped. "This isn't fact. It's out of context." But viewers were already seeing the truth. On screen, a live poll started to roll. It hadn't been planned, but producers ran it anyway. "Do you believe the documents presented by Congresswoman Crockett are real?" In less than a minute, the numbers shot up. 68% voted yes. Vance wiped his forehead. The smile he'd worn earlier was long gone. He started to stumble over words, called it a smear job, accused Crockett of wanting attention. But no one was listening. To his defense, they were watching his unraveling. Across social media, clips began to spread in real time. A TikTok video was posted showing Crockett calmly laying down each document like cards in a poker game. Text over the screen read, "She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard." It hit 1 million views before the show even ended. Back on set, the anchor cleared his throat. "We're going to bring on a legal analyst now to provide some context." Vance didn't look at him. His hands were clenched on the table. Then he stood up. The camera stayed on him as he walked off the set, not running, just walking fast, with his phone already in his hand, his other hand shaking slightly. Behind the scenes, chaos. His communications director, Simon, stood by the water cooler, pale and wide-eyed. "We're trending in 7 states, he said, quietly. "And not in a good way." "Pull the official account," Vance snapped. Simon hesitated. "You sure? Going dark makes it worse." "It is worse," Vance said. "If we post the wrong thing now, it'll blow up again." They tried to do damage control, but it didn't work. They couldn't trace the leak. No one knew who had given Crockett the files. Her team had kept it locked tight. Even now, Patrick Healy's name hadn't been mentioned once. He had vanished, like he was never there, and that made it even harder for Vance to fight back. Meanwhile, something else was breaking. A second whistleblower came forward. This time anonymously, through a nonprofit legal service. A legislative researcher from another office had seen Crockett's documents on TV and recognized language she had written months ago. It was reused, cut and pasted, into one of the bills Vance had pushed. She provided a sworn statement confirming it. The anchor's legal analyst, now live via satellite, broke it down carefully. "If these emails line up with legislative movement and campaign donations, this may not just be an ethics issue," she said. "This could turn into something much bigger." Vance watched the broadcast from his green room in silence. His phone buzzed, then buzzed again. Donors were pulling out. Fundraising events were getting canceled. A senator who had planned to speak alongside him that evening now said he needed to reassess priorities. People were jumping ship. All the while, Jasmine Crockett hadn't moved from her seat. She just sat, water bottle in hand, folder now closed. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't gloating. She was watching the system react, watching Vance realize this wasn't about bad press. It was about being seen for who he really was, and the country was watching too. The storm didn't end the moment the cameras cut or when J.D. Vance left the studio. It only got quieter, more controlled. Within 48 hours, the Senate Ethics Committee announced it had opened a formal review. The words were measured, official, credible documentation of potential undue influence. But underneath that, the message was clear. This wasn't going away. Vance's office scrambled. Donors pulled their funding, quietly at first, then in waves. Fundraising dinners were canceled. Joint appearances were postponed. The next week, news channels ran split-screen coverage. Vance ducking questions outside. A closed-door meeting. Reporters trailing him down Capitol hallways. And on the other side, Jasmine Crockett, walking with quiet confidence through the same halls, stopping only when she had something worth saying. Meanwhile, her office filled. With letters. Real ones. Handwritten, folded, stamped. Notes from coal miners in West Virginia, retired teachers in Kansas, high school students from Oakland. Some were messy, full of spelling errors and crossed-out words, but the meaning was always clear. Thank you. You made us feel seen. You spoke, up when it counted. But Jasmine didn't act like she had won something. She didn't celebrate or chase headlines. In one short interview, she said, "Heroes don't have folders, they have instincts." She meant it. This wasn't about being brave. It was about doing the job with honesty. One afternoon, she opened a letter from someone she hadn't heard from in years, her old middle school teacher, Mrs. Darnell. The letter was short, just a few sentences. It ended with, "We don't always get to see courage in real time. You gave people that." Jasmine sat with that for a while. It wasn't praise that moved her. It was the quiet truth in it. Then came more proof. A second whistleblower. Not from Vance's team, but from another office entirely. She'd seen parts of the leaked memo on the news and realized she had written something almost identical. The language had been reused, word for word, across different bills. Same phrases, same talking points. It was bigger than one senator. That's when it hit Jasmine. This wasn't just about exposing Vance. It was about a system where lobbyists didn't just whisper. They wrote the script. She began working on a formal letter to the Senate Ethics Committee, carefully compiling all documents, linking every date, every sentence, every file trail. Not to blow things up, but to show a pattern no one could ignore. One night, long after most staff had gone home, Jasmine and Rami sat in her office surrounded by papers. He looked up from his laptop. "You ready for next week?" he asked. She smiled, just a little. "Let's bring shoes with thick soles." He raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "There's going to be a lot of walking back from people who said nothing." They both laughed softly. Not with joy, but with the kind of tired honesty that comes after hard work. The room was quiet again. Before heading out, Jasmine glanced at the growing pile of letters by the window. One caught her eye, a small envelope. Inside was just a clipping from a local paper with her face circled in pen, and a tiny pin in the shape of a sunflower. No note, no name. Just a quiet thank you, from someone who didn't need words to be heard. She held the pin in her palm for a moment, then placed it carefully in the same folder that started everything. The one she carried into the studio. The one filled with truths that couldn't be ignored. She sat back in her chair. The lights, low, her eyes steady. No shouting, no victory speech. Just a woman doing the job, and not backing down.